Hello all, thank you very much for joining me for March's manga wrap-up. Got a few things to talk about this month. So the first thing I finished reading was the last two volumes of Captain Harlock. This is volume 2, and the final volume, volume 3, by Leiji Matsumoto. Overall, just kind of cut to the chase, I was quite disappointed with how this series turned out. It started off quite promising, especially coming off of the back of Space Battleship Yamato, which really wasn't that polished. This series started off promising, but just kind of petered out towards the first half of the second volume. Questions that were questions that were asked from the first volume continued to be asked over and over and over again, even when the answers to those questions were very plainly obvious. An example being the Mazon, who are like the main antagonist, the main antagonistic race in this series, perform like a scan on the Arcadia, the ship that Captain Harlock pilots, and the Arcadia has a crew of 40. So there's 40 people, including Captain Harlock himself, but the signal detects 41. And there's a continuous question being asked whether or not the Arcadia has sentience, whether it's got a soul, and it's very obvious. It's very, very, very obvious. And Captain Harlock keeps making reference to his dearly departed friend who built the Arcadia, and it gets boring after a while, because it's like, yes, I know you have a dearly departed friend who, for some reason, in conversation with your crew, who also know who this person is, you don't refer to this person by the name. You're just like, my dearly departed friend who died, in a struggle. Like it's purely for the audience. It's just to kind of prolong this unnecessary suspense, and we never really get to know the answers to these questions that are continually asked throughout the series. Who is Captain Harlock's dearly departed friend? What are his motivations? Why is the conflict with the Mazon not really resolved? This manga left a lot of questions unanswered. And I've since seen reviews of the Captain Harlock anime, particularly by my friend Owen, Immortalium. And there's characters that appear in the anime that don't appear in the manga at all. And I believe that the manga came first, so the animated series is an adaptation of the manga. And I don't know if that was a conscious decision from Leiji Matsumoto himself, if he knew that as he was writing this, that it was going to be adapted into an anime, so perhaps he left certain story elements to the anime director, or whether or not he intended to make a sequel to this, I really don't know. But the story leaves a lot to be desired. There's not really any character growth for Captain Harlock or the other secondary character who you can see on the front cover here, Tadashi Daiba. He's supposed to act as kind of like a conduit for the audience, but he doesn't really fulfill that role in any meaningful way at all, and more often than not just kind of ends up getting in the way of the other crew members and causing them trouble. At one point he gets kidnapped by the enemy just through his own reckless actions, so he's not a likable character at all. And there was one final straw that really made me dislike him, and that's when he's told that his station on the Arcadia will be that below another one of the veteran officers, a female officer called I think she's called I can't remember her name. Anyway, he doesn't like the idea of a female officer outranking him, and he doesn't like taking orders from a woman. And that was just, by no means am I like a diehard feminist or whatever, but it would just, there was no narrative purpose for it. There was no narrative purpose for him just being really misogynistic. And I don't care, misogyny and misandry, just two sides of the same dirty coin. and I don't know if it's just a product of its time, and you know the views towards women and female characters in those days, especially in a shonen series, were, you know, normalized back then maybe, but it didn't really age well, and I really did not like Tadashi Daiba as a character. I don't know if he's developed any more in the anime series. I really don't, but from what I can gather, the anime series is leagues and leagues better than the manga itself. So, unfortunately, this isn't something that I would recommend for a first-time reader of Leiji Matsumoto's work. And given that this is the second of his works that I've read, I've still to read Queen Emeraldus. Unfortunately, I don't really have high hopes, and I don't particularly look forward to reading Queen Emeraldus if it's just going to be more of this. You know, unfulfilled plot lines, lack of any character depth. You know, that same kind of romantic rhetoric through the first volume. It really pervades the second and third volume. Captain Harlock and his, you know, operatic kind of speeches and things like that. It gets very tiresome very quickly. I mean, I was already tired of it from the first volume, and it really just it's more of the same in the second and third volume. It tries to add elements of drama and you know, high stakes, not really to any avail. It fails to establish any sense of gravitas when the characters are coming up against you know, insurmountable odds, such as trying to escape a planet that is sucking them into another dimension, or, you know, the being pursued by an entire fleet of Mazon battleships. It's just, you know, that Arcadia is going to pull through. So yeah, no, I was really looking forward to reading Captain Harlock, and I'm disappointed that I'm disappointed. Like I feel like I've been duped, and I don't regret buying it. You know, these still really beautiful hardcovers, and, you know, the artwork is still really beautiful. You know, some really gorgeous, you know, boom pages and, you know, things like that are just beautiful. You know, the artwork is really fantastic in places. But it would have been much more easier to digest had it all just been condensed into one short volume. And maybe it's a victim of its own time, and maybe I would enjoy this a lot more had I watched the anime first. But yeah, unfortunately, I can't really ever see myself reading this again. I do have promise for the anime, because I know there's characters in the anime that are very important and integral to the actual Captain Harlock story that don't actually feature in the manga at all. So the anime seems really the kind of definitive way to experience this story, and I'm only regretful that I didn't check it out first. So yeah, unfortunately, that's my thoughts on Captain Harlock, the manga. So let's move on to what I read next. So I've just finished Satoshi Kon's Opus. This was the next thing that I pulled out of my TBR jar. A nice little short read. This is actually an omnibus, a 2-in-1 omnibus, which you wouldn't really tell just by looking at the size of it. I mean, it does actually clocking at just little over 370-ish pages, 363 pages actually, where it ends. And that's just according to MyAnimeList. I don't actually know if it was serialized that way originally, but this is a beautiful little release from Dark Horse, and a beautiful cover, as you can see here. This is the third work I've read by Satoshi Kon now, the first being Tropic of the Sea, which I read a couple of years ago. And if you've read my, or if you've rather watched my last month's wrap-up video, you'll see that I read Dream Fossil. Now, out of the three, this so far is my favourite. I absolutely loved this. This was really fantastic, and somewhat of a tragic ending as well, due to the untimely passing of Satoshi Kon himself, as he was never able to finish this. Even though this was originally serialized in 1994 to 95, I believe. It was around the time that he'd started working more in animation. He started directing, a lot of films, and he was currently working on Perfect Blue, which was to be released a couple of years after, as he was working on this. So he put this on indefinite hiatus, and obviously it remained incomplete until his death. But essentially, it is still really worthwhile reading and picking up. The story does have somewhat of a conclusion, although it doesn't really resolve the main sort of plot. And just to kind of give you a brief sort of summary of what the plot is, it's about a manga author called Chikara, and he has a manga series called Resonance. And he's just finished the final chapter where he decides to kill off one of the main characters, and he's about to hand over the manuscripts to his editor, to finally get it published or serialized. When that character decides to pop out of the page and drag Chikara into the manga to stop him from being killed off. So it's this really meta look at the relationship between the manga author and the characters, and it just kind of delves into this really sort of meta plot narrative of this character trying to stall or halt his own death in the series as was written by the author, and the author trying to chase him through the different pages, through the different volumes of the actual manga itself, to try and stop this character from undoing the events that led up to him being killed off. So it's this kind of world breaking apart sort of story. And what's really interesting about it is the artwork does a really good job at differentiating between reality and fiction. Even though this itself is a manga, there's really interesting parts of the story where the manga author is inside his own manga, and he's walking, he's walking past, he's walking down the street, or he's walking through a town with the other main character, Satoko, and he gets to a part of the town that he hasn't drawn yet, and it's just really kind of super deformed background characters, and really flat-looking buildings that are a lot smaller than he is, because obviously he's walking through sort of like a warped perspective. He's walking through his own manga, so he's not actually in an actual town. He's in like a two-dimensional space. It's really, really, really strange, but it works so well. I would highly recommend this to anyone, even though it doesn't have a definitive conclusion. After Satoshi Kon's passing, they actually found a final rough draft of a chapter that was never serialized, and it does kind of give some sort of a kind of conclusion, or it gives you an idea as to how Satoshi Kon wanted to conclude it. It's kind of like this message to the readers, and Satoshi Kon makes a cameo himself in the manga itself, and like it's basically the last chapter is like a discussion between him and his own editor. I'll just kind of give you an example of, there won't be any spoilers here, so long as you don't read the text bubbles, but you can see it's just kind of line drawings, which is different from the actual manga itself, where as you can see here, there's just like fully inked and everything like that. So it does give some kind of, the ending is very bittersweet, obviously, knowing that it will never ever get finished. It ends on a note where he's basically saying, I'm busy right now with my animation projects, and I will come back to this one day in the future, so please look forward to finding out the ending of Opus. And it's really sad, because obviously we know that will never come to pass. So even though I really, really enjoyed it, and obviously, you can't fault anyone for the fact that it's not finished. The man died. He died of cancer, really young as well. So it just really, really bittersweet, because where the story was going, and it was really kind of amping up to a big crescendo of a conclusion, and then it just kind of ends abruptly. I can imagine how awesome the ending for this would have been, and it's just really sad that I know I will never ever ever get to know what the ending was, but still I still really enjoy it for what was released and what was written. I can kind of maybe piece together like my own sort of ending, especially with the final chapter where he kind of gives like a certain kind of clue as to how he might want to end it, or the ideas that are kind of going on in his head for how he might want to end it. You can kind of just kind of piece together, like fabricate your own sort of idea of how it might have ended if you're so creative like that. Who knows? Maybe I would one thing I would like to see perhaps is maybe some of his contemporaries kind of take over from where Satoshi Kon left off with this, and maybe do their own ending. Particularly Katsuhiro Otomo, who worked extensively with Satoshi Kon, or maybe Mamoru Oshii, who worked with him on Seraphim. It would be nice to see maybe some of his contemporaries, at some point in the future, maybe take on their own spin for how this might end. It would never be as good, or it just wouldn't be the same. Obviously, it'd be somebody else's creative direction. And Satoshi Kon has his filmography was very much, it seems, based on ideas that he was exploring in this, like the relationship between reality and fiction, the real and the like imagined or dreamed. A lot of his films mirror that kind of underlying subtext of, is what you experience really what's happening? And I find that really interesting. It's nice to see that seeds that he planted in this bore fruits in his later film works. So if you're a fan of Satoshi Kon, I think you owe it to yourself to pick this up and read it. It's still relatively in print. I just recently picked this up a couple of months ago, and this printing is the first printing, which was from 2014. So I was actually quite surprised to know that this has been out for so many years, and I'm only just picking it up, considering it's a Dark Horse release as well. So Satoshi Kon's Opus, it was as good as everybody says it is, even despite its lackluster. It's not even a lackluster ending; it's an abrupt ending, because it just doesn't end. There isn't an ending. I reckon there would have been a really fantastic ending, and it would have got more critical acclaim and more recognition had it, had he found time to go back to it and complete it. Fantastic artwork, fantastic concepts it deals with. I really can't fault it, even despite its ending. So let's see what else I read next. Okay, the next thing that I read this month, as you can see coming up on the screen now from my TBR jar, oh dear, this was absolute filth. And when I say filth, I don't mean it with filth as in, oh, this is just a nasty, horrible series, don't read it. I mean, it's literally so filthy. It's so bad. It's Heartbroken Angels. I've read the first 2 volumes, or the only 2 volumes, rather, that were ever released in English. These are really old publications when Viz was still pulp, running its pulp magazine in the late 90s and early 2000s. But nevertheless, it's still really nice hardcovers. This was actually originally a 3-volume series in Japan. We only ever got the first 2 volumes in English. Going back to my comment, this is filth in for all the right reasons. It's so smutty and sexual, and funny. It's basically there isn't any story. It's just 4-panel comic strips. It's a Yonkoma. I'll give you an example. Hopefully one that isn't really explicit. Okay, I can't show you that. Can't really show you that either. Can I show you that? Yeah. So as you can see, it's kind of the first one sets up the story, the second one develops the story, and the third panel kind of tells a joke, and then the last panel tells the punchline of that joke. So it's just a series of those. There is a little bit of continuity with the panels. I mean, there's no narrative or anything like that, but it does follow the same sort of characters in different scenarios. One comic series, strip series, is two high school kids who are exploring their sexuality and just finding just the dirtiest things to do to each other in the bedroom and in public and wherever else they might find to do it. There's another really funny strip of a dad and his son who are just completely impoverished, and the dad's always scrimping to save money in any which way he can, even if it comes to like recycling just toilet paper or whatever. There was a strip with them actually where his son cooks ice that he found, and it turns out that he got the ice out of the out of like a sewer grate in the road, and it's stuff like, you can't eat that, you need to wash it first. It's just dirty shit like that. And then a lot of the sexual stuff is just it delves into the taboo of sexuality, like fetishes and things that would otherwise just kind of just make you feel a bit disgusted. Like, I mean, the very first strip in the very first volume is that same couple, that high school couple, and they've been out drinking and they're in the back of a taxi and the girl's about to be sick, and the taxi man's like, don't you dare make a mess in the back of my car. So so the guy lets his girlfriend puke in his mouth, and then she's like, oh, thank you so much, you're so romantic. Yeah. It's disgusting, but I love that kind of toilet humor, and some of the things in it are absolutely revolting. The first volume is a lot funnier than the second volume, I found, as in the second volume a lot of the humor kind of, I think, relies on maybe Japanese trends, like music trends around the time. Like, the artist tends to kind of insert himself as like a cameo, like a pseudo cameo, where he's like a manga writer but also a rock star. And I think it kind of references trends that might have been popular in Japan around the time, which, I mean, this was like, mid to late 90s. I was a kid back then, as well, but not, savvy on Japanese trends. So a lot of the humor kind of fell short for me in the second volume, but the first volume particularly was really, really funny. Let me try find another couple of examples of things that I really enjoyed. Oh God, this one. I love this one. So some of the strips you'll find where it's like a double page spread, even though it's still like a yonkoma, and it's just this guy eating his girlfriend's bogies. I mean, there's just no context to it at all, but it's so funny. There's another one as well where the main character of the strip is like this life model, and if you know anything about art school, life modeling is you just go up there completely, in your birthday suit, and you get sketched. There's a life model, and he's very professional, very stoic. He's there to do a job, and one of the girls flashes him, flashes her knickers, and he just gets an erection, and everyone starts laughing at him because he obviously breaks his composure, and that. Let me see if you try to find another example. Some of these are really, really funny. There's one in the second volume where, and it's so random, but I found it so funny, and I don't know if there was any other hidden meaning in it, but a guy's watching Nightmare on Elm Street, and Freddy Krueger jumps out the screen and just starts jacking him off. I thought that was really funny for some reason. What else is there? There's other characters in this as well that kind of have like repeated appearances. Oh my God, I can't show you this one, but this one's really funny. Oh man, if you can get your hands on these volumes, like, just do. There's a strip here. I'll describe this strip to you. So, so a guy, it's about a serial killer. He's just in the middle of strangling a woman, and the woman's boyfriend comes home. So, what the guy does, he holds up the serial killer holds up the girlfriend's dead body and pretends that, oh yeah, I'm fine, like a puppet. And it turns out that the boyfriend's really, really horny. So the serial killer just bends the body over, while the boyfriend, gets to business, but it's actually him. So he's just getting, handled from behind, and the boyfriend doesn't know. I'm not really doing the description any justice, but it's really, really funny. What I did read about this actually when I was doing a bit of research on it is apparently this manga contains the first ever use of the word fap to describe masturbation. Like, how like now, like saying fap is like an onomatopoeia for male masturbation. Well, apparently this was the first ever usage of that. I don't know if that's the first ever usage of it in manga or just in comics generally, but yeah, that's a useful tidbit of information. The first ever fap meme happens in this. But there's not really much to say other than it's really, really dirty. The paper quality of it is pretty terrible, so the artwork comes across as really muddy sometimes, but it doesn't really, you're not really reading this for the art. The artwork is generally quite terrible. But I would say if you can find this anywhere, these are long out of print, but if you can find them anywhere, by all means, give it a, pick it up. Certainly not for the faint of heart, and if you're not into dirty sex jokes or jokes about shitting on people or pissing in someone's mouth, then it's probably not for you. It's really crude, literally toilet humor. It's probably the dirtiest thing I've read, and one thing that I was very surprised with, and this probably really pushed the envelope on that, is it does actually show full frontal nudity, like full frontal genitalia, male and female, which really surprised me because I think in Japan the laws surrounding that are really strict. I think at the time then when this was published, you weren't even allowed to show pubic hair. So this probably when it was released, probably illegal. I don't know what leaps and boundaries they managed to, what hoops they managed to jump through to get this published, but certainly it wouldn't have, it got past the censors somehow. How it did that, I don't know. So I guess that's kind of historically significant, but I found it really funny. I didn't find the second volume very funny, but the first volume was very funny, and it's one of those ones that you can just kind of pick up, open up a page, and have a quick laugh, and then put it back on the shelf and just forget about it. Will I read it again? Maybe. Maybe if I want a bit of a pick me up, I'll open up a page and see if I can get a chuckle. A lot of the comics panels are, as you would imagine, very hit or miss. But that was Heartbroken Angels. That will unfortunately be going on my on hold list, as I'm probably never ever going to get my hold of a volume 3 because it was never translated. So, I just got to say that it's complete for now, and leave it at that. But I'm glad that I own it still. So let's move on to the next thing that I read for last month. Okay, so the next thing didn't come out of my TBR jar this month. This was actually something that came out of my TBR jar last month, or maybe the month before, and it's something that I held off on for a bit. But I finished what was released, in English at least, of Kingyo Used Books. So volume 2, 3, and 4. There's volume 2. Volume 3. You can see how beautiful these covers are. And volume 4. Now, having read these, I do understand why Viz probably decided to drop this series. In Japan, I think it's about 17 or 18 volumes, and I think it's complete. Namely, a lot of the manga that it references in each of the short stories either have since been released, since this was originally syndicated back in 2011. So this is a 10-year-old series in terms of its English release. And also, there's a lot of trends that happen, or there's one specific trend, rather, that happens in this that may not have been so prevalent back in 2011, which is actually a lot more prevalent now. And that's there being a market for used manga. So this manga really delves deep into what it means and how successful it can be to be a Sedori. And a Sidori is basically somebody who has a real infatuation with not only manga, but somebody who actively seeks out rare used manga to sell them at a profit. And they make a career out of this. Apparently, it's really prevalent in Japan. And I see a lot of people in the YouTube community doing this as well, particularly as of late. So I would like to think that if this was re-released today, then it would probably be a lot more popular than unfortunately it was. But it was a really interesting series, and even though I only read 4 volumes out of 20 or so volumes that have ever been released, I felt like it did kind of wrap up on a nice note, and I'm satisfied with what I did read. There was nothing in it that was too serialized. There was no kind of narrative elements that just kind of went open to possibility, to interpretation, or just no plot threads that were just kind of left untied, because obviously none more of it was released. It still very much remained very episodic, each chapter, and even though that there were recurring characters and recurring themes, they weren't strong enough to make me feel that I was let down, having finished it, that, I really wanted to know what happened with this character, or I really wanted to know what happened with that character. Everything just kind of rounded off kind of nicely for me, and I'm satisfied with what I did read. And for the most part, what I did read was really enjoyable. Particularly, there's a story in the start of this volume, a short story that kind of deals with a student's interest in Message to Adolf by Osamu Tezuka, and I love that series. Message to Adolf is a fantastic series, so it was nice to kind of see a couple of series that I mentioned throughout these short stories that I'd already read or were really familiar with. There's another one in one of the volumes that that mentions Devilman, the whole kind of short stories about Devilman. Another one that's about Ranma Half, where it's like a story about a new couple. It's like a romance sort of short story, and it centers around Ranma Half. There's another one about fashion that surrounds Sailor Moon. So some more titles are a little bit more familiar to me, which is quite nice, rather than the kind of obscure ones that maybe only familiar to a Japanese audience, as this very much did or does cater to a Japanese reading audience. As a lot of the series it mentions are from like the 1940s and 1950s that your common manga reader in the West, in the UK or the US, probably never heard of, unless you're a real connoisseur for manga history, which most people aren't. Think of some other short stories that were really interesting. There was some cool short stories surrounding Leiji Matsumoto works, which is pretty cool. Even though I'm not a big fan of Leiji Matsumoto's work from what I've read, and that's only 2 things. There were some pretty cool things, pretty cool short stories about Leiji Matsumoto. One about Galaxy Express 999. It was about a boy riding on a train. That was pretty cool. There was also a short story surrounding the works of Kazuo Umezu, the master of horror manga. That was pretty cool. I really liked that. It was had some pretty cool characters in that. What else was there? I tended to find that towards the 4th volume, the short stories were really hopping around, doing some really jerky and jarring hops to different scenarios. There's a short story in this where it's about a Japanese traveler who's like going like to the Middle East and France, and he's looking for this basically this character, he owns a used bookstore, and he's trying to track down people who have never returned books, or people who've like defaulted on returning books in a timely fashion. And he travels like across the world to find this one guy who never returned a book. He goes to the Middle East, he goes to France, he goes to Canada or America or something, and eventually tracks him down. And it was a really interesting story. Another story as well was the very last chapter in this starts off a mystery about somebody who's going around burning down used bookstores, which is pretty cool. It does get wrapped up like towards the end of it, but I thought, maybe this is where it kind of starts introducing kind of like a narrative plot element, but it didn't. It just kind of wrapped up nicely in the short story, so I can only then assume that the rest of the volumes kind of follow that same thread, where each story is very much self-contained, which kind of added to my reading enjoyment of it, I suppose, because like I think I mentioned in my previous video, when I was talking about Kingyo used books, that I really hope I don't enjoy it, or I can't remember where I said it or if I tweeted it or something, but I was really hoping that I wasn't going to enjoy Kingyo used books a lot, because, you know, only knowing that I could read 4 volumes, it would have kind of soured my experience if obviously, you know, if I really enjoyed it, with the knowledge that I wasn't ever able to complete it, because I highly doubt that this is a series that would ever be picked back up. It's just so obscure, and yeah, I do understand why Viz dropped it, as I mean, it wasn't popular at the time, but I would like to think that if, as I said, if it was re-released, hopefully it would gain a lot more popularity, given how there's a much more visual, there's a much more alive, like, Western manga culture now. You know, people in the West, you know, in America, in the UK, in Europe, or whatever, you know, everyone's not just infatuated with, like, you know, the main sort of popular series. I mean, obviously you have, you know, the popular series like Attack on Titan, One Piece, you know, all of those, and obviously we've got like a new generation of you know, shonen jump titles like My Hero Academia and you know, Chainsaw Man and all that now. But, you know, people, I mean, the manga community is so much more alive than it was even just 5 years ago. You know, people actively going out and trying to attain, you know, Gekiga titles and out of print titles, and talking about, you know, more obscure titles, which is really, really nice. It's adding a lot of creativity, and not necessarily creativity, but it's adding a lot more spice into the YouTube anime community, or YouTube manga community rather. And because of that, I would like to think that if Kingyo used books was released or re-released today, it would hopefully get a lot more popularity. But that's just me. But yeah, I'm glad to have read the 4 volumes that I do have. Obviously, I read volume 1 a couple of months ago, and I finished off what I had, and I'm really glad I have it for that you know, for where it is. Okay, and the last thing I read in March, I kind of cheated actually, because this isn't something that was in my TBR jar. This is just something that I got on not necessarily on a whim, because it's something that I've always had my eye on. But it is something that I just recently bought, and I didn't even bother putting it in my TBR jar, because it's just something I knew I needed to read as soon as it came in. And that was, oh god, I read all of Dragon Ball. I got the Dragon Ball box set here. I got a really good deal on this. I got it brand new for £54, so it's like roughly about £3.50 per volume. Now, Dragon Ball is something that arguably could say I've been holding off for on... Wow, I mean, Dragon Ball Z was the first manga I ever read. That was, you know, 15, 16 years ago, I don't know. But I've never read Dragon Ball. Obviously in Japan it's just all known as Dragon Ball, you know, 42 volumes. But Dragon Ball, where it's the formative years of Son Goku when he was a kid, never read it. It has always appealed to me, and I have seen the majority of the anime, so, you know, I do kind of generally know what happens, but there's a lot of gaps that that would just blank in my mind, like, you know, who are the Red Ribbon Army, you know, how does Goku get to fighting them and then fighting Demon King Piccolo, and, you know, there was a lot of questions, you know, a lot of blank space in my recollection of Dragon Ball. And for the most part, you know, I enjoyed it. It was a fun little ride, a fun little romp. It was exactly what I expected it to be. If I was surprised by anything, I was surprised at how perverted it was. Like, I knew, you know, Muten Roshi, Master Roshi was a pervert, but the guy is literally a sexual predator. No wonder he lives on an island by himself with a fucking turtle. Yeah, I was surprised at how perverted it was and how much nudity is in it as well. I mean, Bulma, it shows a lot of TNA. Goku's always got his dick out. You know, one thing I was also surprised with as well is how old Goku is, because Goku's like you'd assume is about 7. But when he's first introduced, right at the start of the story, he says he's 14. It's like, what? This little baby's not 14. And then you find out he's 12. But even 12, he doesn't look like a 12-year-old. He literally looks like an 8-year-old. You know, he's short and stubby. He's got baby face. So there, you know, those couple of things I was really surprised with. But for the majority, it was very much what I expected it to be. You know, fun action, really fast paced. I mean, once you're done with the Red Ribbon arc, you know, just within a couple of pages, it moves on to the next thing. You know, there's even, it's only 16 volumes, but there's like 3 tournaments. Just so much that happens in it. It's really, really fast paced. There's not really much breathing room, but I suppose it's not really for, you know, it's not really built for that. It is very much different from its I guess you could say sequel series, its time skip series, Dragon Ball Z, because that was very much more action orientated, and you can tell when Akira Toriyama was writing this that he was, you know, very much fresh off of serializing Dr. Slump, which was a gag manga. So there's a lot of gags in this early on. In fact, for I'd say for a good 3/4 of the manga is just gags, and then when towards the end at the last tournament, that's when it becomes very action oriented. You know, when it introduces Piccolo, not Demon King Piccolo, but Piccolo's reincarnation. You know, the Piccolo that we all know and love. That last arc, when there's that last little time skip where Goku like gets a little bit taller, that's when it really started to feel like an action series, and you know the gags were curtailed in favor of, you know, more choreographed, serious action rather than just action for the sake of jokes and laughs. I mean, the gags in this, I mean, they're just very juvenile, aren't they? I mean, I have a nostalgia for this series. You know, I've got fond memories of watching, you know, different random episodes of the anime when it used to be on Toonami, you know, years ago. I've never actually watched it all the way through. There's many episodes. I've probably only seen about half of the anime and read even less of the manga. So the gags in it were just very much what I expected it to be. You know, just sex jokes, and that's really about it. You know, Krillin is short. Krillin's got a shiny head. You know, Krillin's got no nose. It is what it is. I didn't find it particularly funny, but it was enjoyable. You know, it was a nice little fun romp, and I really love the attention to detail in how the world is rendered. You know, I love the idea. It's kind of like an ancient China setting, but you've got dinosaurs and like a dog is a king. I mean, it's just such a mad concept. A really strange world that it's set in, and you know, you've got really futuristic looking cities and stuff like that. And I like the you know, that there's a real focus on the little hoi poi capsules, you know, like Bulma's capsules. They're very prevalent in this, which they're not really that prevalent in Dragon Ball Z. And having read this, it was the first time I knew that they were called hoi poi capsules. I didn't know that. You know, I thought that was really cool. And I found that the action scenes were a lot more creative and more based on actual hand-to-hand combat rather than, you know, beating struggles, you know, stuff like that. Yeah, it was fun. It was fun, and I'm glad I can finally tick it off my list. You know, in this beautiful little box that it comes in. I would have never paid full price for this, and it's never been a massive priority for me to get, which is obviously why I've got it now. I'm very much, I very much feel that I'm too old for this. And I really felt that as I was reading it, like I really felt like I was reading something that was, you know, catered to children, which is fine. You know, I'll read anything, especially if it's, you know, especially if it's something that's historically significant. But yeah, there you go. That's everything that I read for March. I think it's, I've changed my shelves a little bit, and I'm recording this a couple of days after I don't remember when I recorded the last clip. Anyway, thanks for watching. These are just thoughts off the top of my head. I haven't scripted this or really thought about what I want to say. It's probably a lot more that I want to talk about with Kingyo, but these videos really serve just to kind of just get my immediate thoughts out. And if I want to talk about them more, then I'll do a more in-depth review, just like I did with my Blam review. So if you're interested, I've actually done a review of Blam, a scripted review. I worked really hard on it, to kind of get my thoughts together and try and cover as much as I possibly could. So if you're interested in watching a video of mine that is a lot more concise and not just my own harebrained thoughts, all over the place like these videos, then go ahead and check out my review of Blam. And as always, drop a like, subscribe to the channel. And then put a comment on whatever. Yeah. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you later.